To anyone who has ordered a mail order bride, what was it like and what happened? I dated a girl whose dad had a mail order bride. It took them 2 months to figure out why she wasn't learning anything from her English classes. Turns out the school had messed up and put her in German. You can't make this shit up. I used to work retail with a Filipino woman who was a mail order bride. She was a tiny little thing, around 35 years old. And her husband was a very large, stocky white man around 50-55. I thought it was very weird when she first told me. But when I met him and saw them together, it actually seemed like a nice fit. He was always coming into the store to bring her lunch or to buy her things. And pick her up from work on his motor scooter. It was pretty cute watching them ride it together. It seemed like he really enjoyed spoiling her. And when she talked about him, she seemed very much in love with him. It didn't appear that he was particularly wealthy or anything. But he treated her very well and they seemed very happy. Just before I left that job, she had just became pregnant with their first child. Close bracket. I think an old high school buddy of mine did this. Went off to college on the West Coast. Came back with a Thai wife who barely spoke any English. He spoke a bit of Thai, but not much. They were together for about 3 years. Then she just up and disappeared one morning, leaving their son behind. Not sure what happened to her. He claimed she went back to see her family. We joke that he killed her. He may have killed her though. This weird, creepy friend of a friend married one. He was a Desert Storm vet with PTSD and maybe mild autism. We used to go shooting with him sometimes because we were extremely bad at making life decisions. Once, he showed up at my friend's house and no one was home. So he let himself in and sat quietly in the living room with the lights off for several hours until we got back. Gave us a hell of a scare. Anyhow, he met this stunning Ukrainian woman on one of those mail order bride sites and sort of dropped off the map. A couple years later I ran into him at a thrift store and he told me about how they're both bounty hunters now. I knew a guy who owned his own business that got one. He got crushed by a skid steer and she now owns the business and has a new husband closer to her age. Edit. Hot damn, this really blew up overnight. I'll answer questions throughout the morning. To answer a couple of the most frequent. 1. He was killed. 2. Ran over his lower abdomen. 3. There was an investigation, however he was alone and she had an alibi that was backed up by the guy that she is currently with. 4. A skid steer is also commonly known as a skid loader or bobcat. Google is your friend. My dad had one a few years back. He met her online and flew out to get her after a while. She was a shut-in and was legitimately afraid of me because she thought I was smoking pot. Funny thing was that I had never smoked weed at the time. I was 17. It was a weird dynamic. If I was home she stayed in her room. Unless I had been in my room for an extended period and she deemed it safe to get food from the kitchen. My room was in the basement just for clarification. The few times we crossed paths she would see me, gasp and then run to her room. My dad never saw this as a problem. He basically catered to her every want and need. Also I should mention he was 56 and she was 29. A year later I moved out. Since then she has attacked him on 2 occasions and had him arrested. Eventually he sent her back. Or maybe she left, I don't know. I no longer speak to my father, so that's the extent of my knowledge. My dad has a mail order bride. It feels so f-king weird typing that out. Only a handful of people know about it. He met her on a website. Flew over to visit. Was married by the time he got back. And now I have a half sister. One of my mom's friends married a mail order bride from the Philippines about 10 years ago. I spent New Year's at their house 2 years ago and let me tell you, it's even creepier in person than you ever dreamed it could be. He's approaching 80 by now and she's mid-30s. He just hangs off of her, insisting on PDA at every opportunity. I think she's remarkably well adjusted given the circumstance. Over the years she's saved enough money to bring over several family members, which I'm sure is some welcome solace. Are mail order husbands a thing? You know. For a friend. Edit. Guys. I'm 24. Hopefully I have a few years left before I need to consider ordering my husband off the internet. I had a friend of a friend who did it. He was an unappealing neckbeard with a terrible personality. He got a truly gorgeous Vietnamese girl, through some bride-to-order agency, who was really sweet and seriously. A catch. The girl left him as soon as she legally could, having gained citizenship. Honestly, I think the deal worked out really well for both of them. I also think if the guy was worthy of her, or even just a sweet guy, she would have stayed. Some guy in my small hometown married a Filipino mail order bride. Guy was kind of a creep and it didn't last. She left him and got a minimum wage job at a fisheries shop, grilling work for no money. She cried when she got her first paycheck. She couldn't believe how much money it was. Really put my quality of life into perspective. I'm pretty rich for a poor person and I occasionally remember this tidbit when I lose my way. I doubt he's a Redditor. So here's my dad's friend's story as my dad tells it and as I've observed. She's Asian and he paid for her to go to school to become a pharmacist and they live in a newly built house and raise chickens. She was very adamant about the chickens. One of my uncles, who is Filipino, convinced one of his white co-workers to marry his 28-year-old niece who was still living in the Philippines at the time. The guy was at least 20 years older than her. The relationship was really rocky the first 2 years. She hated him, basically. But she stuck with the relationship. Got him to go to church and they were more or less together. About 10 years into the marriage the guy needed a kidney transplant. Months pass. He can't work anymore and she's spending all her free time outside of work taking care of him at the hospital while he's waiting for a kidney. I visited one time while he was in the hospital and she broke down telling my other relatives and me how much she loved him and she didn't want to lose him. The doctors finally give him like less than 3 months to live if he doesn't get a kidney and after a month and a half later, he got the kidney, recovered and went back to work within a year's time. At a family get together he bragged to everyone including me about how amazing he feels and how much he thought he was dead and that he was blessed to have a new lease on life. Then a few months later I get a call from him saying that he's met someone online and that he still considers me family. In shock. I tell him I'm busy and then called my aunt who then explained to me he found a 21-year-old single Filipino mom from Cebu and already filed divorce papers against my uncle's niece, who was almost 40 at the time. My landlord senior year had a mail order bride. She spoke zero English but he just had her kind of follow him everywhere. Helped his rich guy vibe. He also had cameras in our apartment. He knew about every guy I'd had over and told my parents who told me. They already knew from me so it was a power play by him. Threatened a lawsuit and got the hell out. I used to work filling propane tanks. I was filling one for this Russian lady one day and she looks at me. Are you single? Double quote. No. Why? Double quote. Too bad I have friend in Russia perfect for you. You pretty sure she was going to try and hook me up with a mail order bride? Or someone trying to get their green card? My friend Richard has a mail order bride from the Philippines. He's a scruffy redneck long haul trucker from West Virginia. She's tiny, slender, and 10 years his junior. At first she cooked, cleaned, and kept his bed warm. But after a few years she told him she wanted an education. He put in a ton of overtime and saved up enough to put her through college. She's a physician's assistant now and makes more money than he ever has. But she still makes him dinner and makes a point of always being waiting at the door when he gets back from a long haul. They've been together for 20 years now and it's a joy to see them together. My father's cousin brought back a Vietnamese wife from the war. I believe she was a prostitute. He's long since passed. But at the rare gathering on that side of the family that woman is a f***ing riot. She hugs everyone and loudly proclaims how good it is to see meet us and is super enthusiastic about everything. She shares no blood with any of us and she is the happiest person to see every single family member. It was pretty damn funny learning her story after the fact. My great grandmother was a mail order bride. A man in central Louisiana had been widowed and wanted someone to raise his kids and help out on the farm. This was 1935ish. My great-grandmother saw the ad in Kentucky and said she'd do it. However, she neglected to tell him she'd be bringing 4 kids with her. I guess when she got here, the guy was oh well, that's cool, and allowed her and the kids to stay. My grandmother was the only one to stay down here, though. The other kids went back to Indiana when they were old enough. My dad's co-worker got one from Vietnam. He went on a love vacation or whatever they call it. They got married shortly thereafter and she moved to the US. Then, after 3 months in the US, she called the cops on him, saying he was abusing her. He got kicked out of his own house. She divorced him, and he lost a bunch of assets to her. A couple years later, I found out he married another one from a different country, thinking he'd have better luck. IDK what happened with that one for sure, but I know it didn't last either. Buckle up. This one's weird. Grandfather had a mail order bride from the Philippines. They got married within a couple of weeks. She made us popsicles made from guacamole. We got them a dog named Sasha. She thought we said Tasha and now its name is Tasha. Married like 2 years. She took the dog's husband and daughter, pretty boy and pretty girl, and fled the state after she got her driver's license. IDK how my grandfather got the dogs back. Friend growing up suddenly got a Russian older brother. I found out when I was older that his stepmom was a mail order bride. Something was really off about the dad. But the stepmom and stepson were very kind. Found out the dad was beating the stepmom and got her legal help. Son ended up in jail for molestation and no idea what happened to the dad. But I know there was a restraining order. Edit. For clarity, every time I say son it is the man's son, and every time I say stepson I mean the Russian lady's son. Wrote this at 1 AM my time and it made perfect sense then. A patient at my uncle chiropractic clinic is 75 plus, morbidly obese, and uses a power scooter. One day he scooted into the building with an extremely attractive Filipino girl, early 20s, riding on his lap. She was a mail order bride. The old guy was pretty wealthy, so I've always imagined swooping in after he dies. There's a great ethnography on the subject called Romance on the Global Stage. I read it in college, and while I was supposed to be writing a paper on it, I got curious and got myself 2 foreign snail mail pen pals. All of us are female. One of them is still in France and we still keep in touch 10 years later. The other, from Russia, married my male best friend and I was the best man at their wedding. So the joke is that I mail ordered a bride for him. Edited to correct the title of the ethnography. Incorrectly remembered it as Veiled Sentiments. Another great ethnography. My sister's father has a mail order bride from China. She was a divorcee with a 17-year-old son. I only got to meet her once, but she was really nice and cooked the most amazing food. Last year my sister's dad finally started taking Chinese language classes as a surprise and found out that her cute nickname for him was Fat American. I'm the mail order bride. Well, sort of. More like mail order husband. I met 2 Korean women on Tinder Plus a year ago. We started chatting and really hit it off. After a month or so, she offered to fly me to Korea for a week in order to get to know me better. I've been back to see her about 7 times now. We're totally in love and I'm planning to move there next year. She's 12 years older than I am. Has 2 kids from her previous marriage and makes a lot more than I do. She speaks English fluently. But I'm learning Korean. I used to play Magic at a game store where the owner often went to Thailand to star in shemale porn. He was very open about it and would tell you about it and show you the DVDs if you asked. Anyway, on one of his trips he decided to bring home a bride. She was a very nice younger woman. They lived in his store. He converted the back room of his comic shop into a studio apartment, and she basically stayed in that back room all the time. He would occasionally yell at her to make him food, and that was generally the only time we would see her. She stayed with him just long enough to get her citizenship and then bailed on him. I've read several of the comments and see that a number of these worked out well. I knew 2 men that got mail order brides and in both cases it worked out badly for them. In both cases that I know about, the woman married the men, came to the US, got pregnant, and then as soon as the baby was born, they moved out and started living with a boyfriend and filed for divorce. I'm not saying all mail order brides do that. I'm just saying these 2 did. I'm glad these mentioned here worked out well. My neighbor growing up had a mail order bride from either Russia or Ukraine. They had a son. He was an asshole. We had a bonfire one night and he decided to surprise me and everyone else around by throwing batteries into a fire. F-ked up shit. Came home from a half day at school one day to see cop cars in front of the house. Turns out that the father was beating the wife and raping the son. That's why he was always kinda messed up. I met my wife through a website. I was 40. She was 25. We chatted online and long distance for a couple of months. Then I took a trip to go visit her in her country. She had a regular job working for USAID in Zambia. I remember seeing her in person for the first time at the airport in Lusaka. I was struck by how tall and beautiful she was. We got married 9 days later. That was 12 years ago. We're still together and we've got 4 kids. Sometimes these relationships don't work out, but sometimes they do. Everybody here seems to know one who did, but not themselves. I actually married a mail order bride, if you can call it so. She wasn't actually a mail order bride, but I went to Moscow and stayed at a hotel where it is known that Russian women who are looking for a foreign, preferably American German, husband hang out. Anyway, I met her there. We had a short romance and we got married and she moved with me to the US. I can't say the marriage was a success because we divorced 2 years later. The culture gap was just too much to overcome and obviously she understandably didn't have love on her mind but rather a way to improve her life and move to another country. I still harbor no resentment and take responsibility. A guy at work got his bride from Korea back in the 80s. They've been happily married since about 1985. I met her during the Christmas party last year. She's an incredibly talented woman who can speak 4 languages. She speaks better English than her native-born American husband. Before they retired, she was an English teacher, if I recall correctly. From what I hear from him, his relationship is the exception, not the rule. High school friend of mine met a man on vacation in the Caribbean. She's a pudgy, insecure 30-year-old girl and he was a handsome, younger guy working at the resort where she stayed. They were married within the year and he moved to our country. It's now been about a year since their marriage and she just purged all his photos from Facebook and changed back to her maiden name. 2 weeks before the purge she was posting about how proud she was that he got his citizenship. I guess he didn't wait long after that. Open bracket. I feel awful for her. Poor girl. She really was desperate to believe he actually loved her. Former colleague of mine. Lovely guy. Met a chick in Thailand. She was a single mum with a couple of kids. He took them on as his own. Brought her to the UK. Built a house for her. The works. They quickly had another kid. Then, when that kid was about 7, she just left him and the 3 children and went back to Thailand. He tried to track her down. Got terribly injured and almost died in a freak accident in Cambodia in the process. Then went back to the UK. He still lives with all 3 kids and hasn't heard from her since. I'm pretty sure my father-in-law's has a mail order bride. She's from East Asia and is a nice little petite, hard-working lady. He's a 400-pound slob who she waits on him hand and foot. I actually prefer her to be around most of the time instead of him. I used to work with a lady called Tina who was, I think, mail order from China. Her husband was pretty much an uptight asshole. One day she came into work and asked us to confirm something hubby had said. He told her now she was living in New Zealand she needed to act like a Kiwi woman does, meek, shy and always eager to please her husband. Once we had recovered from the laughter, we put her right. New Zealand women don't take tea from anyone. I met her again years later. She was single. Went by Wei Chen and had a kick-ass job and a great attitude. My dad had a friend who had pondered away his life. He was above 400 pounds. He lived alone. His mother paid for his groceries. Everyone at work talked about how he would die before he was 45. He purchased a mail order bride from China, I think, or elsewhere, not sure, and within 4 months she was pregnant. They had the child 2 years ago and I'm not sure how they are doing. I used to know a mail order bride. Her name was Ivy. She was Filipino and was married to a fat, useless slob of a man. He used to be a regular at a strip club I was bartending at. He'd come in on the poker nights to gamble away his welfare check and father's inheritance money. She'd come in and sit on the bar stools and talk to the girls, a few vodka and cokes in, and he'd learn her entire story. She was actually intelligent and outrageously funny in a cynical kind of way. Her English was okay. Sometimes her syntax would let her down or she'd get words mixed up. But she could have a full conversation and she understood sarcasm to a degree. The customer, her husband, was entitled, loud, stank like sh*t and never tipped anyone. Dancer or bartender, and usually had to be kicked out when he lost at poker for trying to fight the dealer, the winner and the bouncer. I think she was happy for him to try and grope the dancers for a few hours as it took the attention off her. The staff all liked her. And she was pretty enough that if she ever decided to kick the slob to the gutter she could have danced to make some cash. TBH, I do hope she leaves him eventually. No woman deserves to put up with a man like that. I don't know if it counts as mail order bride, but my dad, 60, met his wife, 38, on a Russian dating website. They had to talk over a translator service at first, but she took English classes and eventually moved to Ors. When I asked dad why he specifically went to a Russian dating site rather than just dating locally, he said, "Women here have been given too much," and went on a rant about how women need to know their place. K. Dad. I know several guys who had mail order brides. All were military or ex-military. That's why so many mail order brides were from places where there were US bases like the Philippines. One guy, ex-Navy, brought over a Filipino wife. He seemed to love her. She did not adapt well. She would never answer the phone if he was not home, even though he explained it was him calling her. She wouldn't drive his car and a bunch of other things like that. She seemed nice, but was lonely. So he brought over her sister and things really changed. We used to travel 4 weeks for work, and one time when we got back, the wife and sister were gone. Killed him and he never saw it coming. That was years ago and I never heard what happened. Used to know a guy in SoCal who got a Filipina mail order bride. And he got just what he wanted. This girl was from a jungle village. As in she could climb tall trees barefoot to harvest coconuts or what have you. Young, sweet, cute, petty woman who was learning English quite well. She was happy to be whisked away to relative prosperity and he was happy to have someone completely dependent on him. He refused to let her get a driver's license. She seemed to have the wits to handle her situation. This was 24 years ago. So what happened with them I have no idea. My dad has had a few over the past years. He paid for a 6-week holiday where they traveled all across America and then he flew her home to where we live in Australia. She was missing a thumb but they were close in age. She used to make my school lunch a 1 centimeter thick slice of cheese, sausage, mustard between bread. What the fuck? Dad never married her and when she realized she stabbed him with a fork, he sent her back and I got the car he bought her. The second he paid for flights to Bali for a rendezvous and got her pregnant, so he married her because he thought that's what he should do. They ended up both cheating on each other and he pays for flights around the world in exchange of this love child that they've made because he wants the child in his care and not go through the court system. So now he has 2 only children to 2 failed marriages who both will probably grow up to resent his twisted family dynamics.